Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Illinois, and welcome to our webinar today titled Leveling Up and Understanding the Convergence of Gaming and Gambling in Young Adults. My name is Robbie Fuqua, and I will be your host for today's presentation. And we are excited to bring back Julie Hines as our guest speaker today. She is the Executive Director of the Oregon Council on Problem Gambling and considered a subject matter on today's subject. But before I turn over the reins to Julie, we do want to make a few announcements. First off, we hope that you and your families are being safe and healthy during these uncertain and pretty much unprecedented times. I would say even in recent history, I should probably clarify that. But we also hope that you're also keeping safe by practicing, those social distancing protocols that are advised and recommended, and in some states mandated by either our federal, state, local authorities. And by the looks of the numbers of the attendees on today's webinar, that has pretty much spiked. You're all inside and being compliant with those. But I think part of the reason for the large number today is for Julie herself, which she's a great speaker, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say today. But we also want to take this opportunity to update you on all the of course, upcoming training events that you can view and register for online at weknowthefeeling.org. Just click on the For Providers tab, which FORS is FOR, and there you're going to see all the webinars and remaining 4-day gambling disorder workshops that are currently available. That's where I'm going to start. Unfortunately, we're sad to announce that we had to cancel the Springfield training that was scheduled for April 28th, 29th, May 6th, and 7th that Dr. David Ledgerwood was going to be doing at the University of Illinois in Springfield on their campus there. Now, if you were registered for this workshop, what I'm telling folks who I'm either, talking with via email or who call, I'm recommending everybody to go to weknowthefeeling.org and register for the next Springfield class, which I would have to say logically is the most safe because it's our last of fiscal year 2020. The dates on that one are June 17th, 18th, 25th, and 26th. That will also be held on the UIS campus. But please note, and I have to be upfront and fully transparent during these time, or at any time, right? But really during this time, the 3 currently workshops
I need you not to be arguing right now, please.
Are subject to either being postponed or canceled in accordance to the measures that we're executing to comply with the social distancing and the other precautions that are advised by the state of Illinois that will help, keep we and all our communities safe and healthy. So at this time, we're unsure of any specific rescheduling dates for this most recent April-May Springfield class or any future potential postponements or cancellations. But just stay tuned and, be looking at weknowthefeeling.org website for announcements and updates along with these webinars. Now, you're going to see, feel free to reach out to me, guys, as well. My name and personal phone number is on that page and email at the bottom. So click on the For Providers tab and you can ask me as feel free, or just check the website. And I'll be making these announcements too. Now, the next 4-day workshop is still scheduled. It's still on at this point in time, and it's for May 12th, 13th, 19th, and 20th at Wren Lake College in Mount Vernon. This one will be followed by our Chicago training, which will be held at the UIC campus on May 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th. But I do need to tell you that this one is full. You can contact me to get on the wait list, but honestly, I would wait maybe a few weeks to see how this is going to go. Now, this one's going to be facilitated. We're excited to say that Dr. David Ledgerwood will be conducting this one in late May in Chicago. He'll be there then. And moving to June, we also have, I'll be teaching a course in Bloomington at Chestnut Health Systems, the 4-day workshop on the 4th, 5th, 8th, and 9th. And finally, again, we'll be in Springfield at the UIS campus again, where I'll be, conducting this workshop. Now, Please go to weknowthefeeling.org and go under the providers tab to register for more information, more specific location information. And please note that these workshops are still subject to cancellation and or being postponed due to COVID-19, the pandemic, and we'll keep you updated on any changes as they happen. I personally apologize. We apologize for the inconvenience, for the recent cancellation and any future cancellations. And we hope that you understand under these circumstances. But I have good news here. The good news is that the coronavirus can't get to our webinars, right? In fact, we're currently working to add more in lieu of our workshop cancellation. So also please see the website for more details as they come available, because we're hopefully, and again, that's what I've been working on this morning, is adding more. We're working with the state to add more with great guest speakers and some great subjects too, why we're kind of hunkering in and trying to stop the spread of this thing. Our next scheduled webinar will be on April 6th, where we are happy to announce that Dr. David Ledgerwood will be presenting on gambling and co-occurring disorders. Later on that month, April 21st, I'll be talking on suicide, problem gambling, and gambling disorder. May 5th, we're excited to bring in Dan Trolero. He's the Assistant Executive Director at the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey. He'll be speaking on the wild world of sports betting. I know I've done a few of these, but Dan, if you've ever had the opportunity to hear him, he's a great, passionate, informative speaker. He's going to do his take on sports betting. And then that will be followed by Dr. Ledgerwood again talking on cognitive distortions on June 23rd. Again, please check the website for all of these training events, which unfortunately includes any future postponing or cancellations of the remaining scheduled 4-day workshops starting with Mount Vernon, I think May 12th again in May. So just be ready for it, just in the case. But also on the brighter side, be checking the website for those added webinars I'm talking about that we're currently working on. Now, I would like, before I forget, to thank the Illinois Department of Human Services for providing this webinar, all these training events that I'm talking about, free through their sponsorship. We're still excited about this. We still want to provide these to you. It's just in a different kind of way, right? So now for today's, if you're new on, and as I said, we had 125 registered for this. So we're happy to have everyone on. And if you're new to the webinar, I just want to let you know a little bit about how we're going to format this. And remember, in order to receive your CEU, you must be on the call for the entire presentation, obviously, of course. But you also have to participate on all 3 polling questions. You've probably noticed also that you're muted, and if you've ever been on a webinar with background noise, then you know why you're muted, right? So if you have any questions, just chat us or raise your hand or pose your question via the Zoom platform and we'll try to get to you. If for some reason we miss you, again, I'll be checking these. We can answer you via email, but I know during our last one, Julie was able to get to a few questions. So we're going to save actually the last portion too, maybe 5-10 minutes, depends. You guys know when I do a talk, usually I go almost all the way up to the point, but if maybe we can save, we'll see how this goes. If we can save the last few minutes, we'll do that for questions. So without further ado, Julie Hines is the Executive Director of the Oregon Council on Problem Gambling. She's focused her work in the problem gambling field since 2002. Her roles have been the Director of Responsible Gambling with the Massachusetts Council on Compulsive Gambling, being the Coordinator of Prevention Lane's Problem Gambling Prevention Program and an instructor at the University of Oregon. She was also a co-investigator of the 2016 Problem Gambling Services Survey in the U.S. and providing training and technical assistance consultations across the U.S. as well. Now, in 2012, Julie was honored with the NCPG Wolfing Prevention Award. She is currently the Secretary of the NCPG Board of Directors and a certified prevention specialist. If you've heard Julie talk, you know she's very well informed. We're great to have great speakers like Julie on. It's kind of like having a conference via Zoom, you know. The first time I heard her talk was at the NCPG conference a couple years ago, and she's great. I've heard her talk at others as well. So Julie, without further ado, I'll let you take over.
All right, thanks so much, Robbie, and thanks so much, everybody, for being on this call. I know that there's a lot going on right now, as Robbie already alluded to. We're going to fly through things. It's a very, very short webinar, so hopefully it just is something that, you know, gives you a little bit more information and yet is not too fast or too overwhelming at the same time. So again, just thank you so much for being here. Thanks for Morneau Chappelle and the Illinois Department of Human Services for hosting. This is not going to be a normal webinar. I've already gotten up 3 times since Robbie started talking. One was to shut the door because the hamster was running on his wheel. The other was to quiet down my kids. And the third one was my dog is making noise every time she runs around. And so anyway, so all that is to say, it's not going to be a normal webinar. We're not in normal times right now. I really hope that the landscapers don't come too close to the house, the neighbors' landscapers. So if things start to become unclear or too loud, please, Robbie, please pipe in so I can be aware of that. All right, so today's objectives real quick is we're going to describe some 3 risks and trends in gambling. We're going to identify relationships with gaming, gambling, and in emerging adults, and this also goes across the age spectrum, and then provide at least 3 tools you can use in your professional and or personal settings. This presentation is not about overall use of screens and technology. I think we're all on a different plane in the last few weeks, and one of the favorite things that I read recently is this tweet that says, well, I know one piece of medical advice I won't be following these times, and that is the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on screen time. And then for those who have Apples, and you know, if you set the reminder on how much screen time you've had, your screen time for the last week was 6 years. So we're in definitely different times, and even such that, you know, this webinar is different now, and I've modified it just to the extent that I can because of COVID-19. We're even seeing, you know, articles about talking about how could video games and other entertainment slow the spread of COVID-19. There's a quick heads up is that some of the material in here will be going into, we'll just be doing a live demonstration of an online gaming a platform, as well as showing how a social casino game works in real time. So just kind of, if you feel like you're triggered at all, if you're someone in recovery, please do take care of yourself. Obviously, you know, since we're on a webinar, nobody's going to notice. So just do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So diving in, so trends and definitions. So, you know, a couple of years ago, the Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act was repealed by the Supreme Court. That allowed all states to decide if they want to have sports gambling, legalized sports gambling. So that really opened up this huge new opportunity in terms of, at least from sports gambling world. And yet, all online betting is still illegal across state lines. And so obviously in Illinois, you now have legalized sports betting, hasn't gone live, but if you want to gamble on sports, you've got to go over to Iowa or you have to go to Indiana. And so will it be interesting to see over time how that works. But just really briefly, how the law is that because of something called the Wire Act of 1961, it does not allow gambling across across state lines, and that does not just include now sports; it includes all gambling. So there was something called the Repeal of the Wire Act, and then there was an interpretation now just about a year ago that interpreted it to include all of gambling across state lines. It'll be very interesting to see how COVID really changes this, especially as revenue has been decreasing, you know, in brick and mortar facilities in terms of looking at, we'll look at that in just a moment when we look at Illinois. But in terms of looking at how sports betting is legalized right now in the United States, these are the states that offer sports betting. And whether they're in brick and mortar or whether they're online or whether they're operated by a lottery or DraftKings, as in the case of New Hampshire, there are a variety of different ways in which each state is implementing this. Obviously, that creates a number of headaches for a number of different institutions, but all of them are making sure that you cannot gamble across state lines. And, you know, I know that we provide this webinar via a recording at a later date, but you can also, if you'd like to, I can send you a PDF of this presentation so that there are live clickable links down at the bottom of each of these slides that have sources. And so if there's a research study, if there's a news story, if there's a website link that you'd like to see, I'm happy to send you that PDF as well. So where does Illinois fit in? You know, obviously we're not in the state of having it live yet, but when sports does go live, you can't bet on Northwestern, you can't bet on the collegiate institutions within Illinois. Some states are doing that, but with sports on hold right now, all sports, time is really going to tell what's going to happen with that shift. There's going to be a need for revenue increase after COVID-19. You know, there's considered essential services and non-essential services right now, and lotteries in many states are considered essential services right now. So that's an interesting dynamic that's happening right now. But and obviously in Illinois, you have a video lottery. And what's going to happen with the loss of revenue in terms of video lottery? Will there be a push for more revenue makeup in another capacity? Could that be online? We don't know. And because of the screeching halt right now with most live sports, you know, for those of us who are sports fanatics, I've even got my Dodgers mug right here. Dodgers are on hold. But with sports fanatics trying to watch something, trying to get involved in participating in anything, there's really not much going on right now, obviously. And so one of my favorite movies, I guess, is indicative of a very sophomoric sense of humor, but Dodgeball, the true underdog story, featured a channel called ESPN The Ocho, and now ESPN is tongue-in-cheek actually having programming such as marble races and stone skipping and sign spinning. And so it's interesting to see what the networks are trying to do to make up for the lack of viewership and revenue that's coming in. So something has to take its place right now. Something has to take the place of traditional sports, whether it's marble racing or whether it's video gaming. That's the world that we're in right now. And it'll be very fascinating to see how this shifts over time, because video gaming has gotten so popular in recent years in terms of viewership and what we call esports. And it will be very interesting to see how esports transitions also into gambling over time. This is a story from the other day talking about iRacing Pro Invitational Series odds and picks. And there are actual NASCAR drivers that are driving in these video games. And you know, it's an alternative to what's happening right now in terms of live sports offerings. So in terms of looking at gaming's convergence, I want to back up for a second, and I want to talk a little bit about defining what is gambling. And I'm sorry if it's way too basic for some of the people, but I do want to go back to it because I think it's important for us to continue to go back at what is the definition of gambling as we move forward in looking at some of the examples that are later on this call. So defining gambling, we're talking about risk. So you're putting something on the line, and it's something of value, and it's in the hopes of gaining something of greater value. And this is per the DSM-5. And is it risking money? Not necessarily. It's risking something of value. So that's important for us to think about as we look into video games and thinking about whether somebody's going to gain or lose potential real money for it. This is a legal definition of gambling. Prize, something to get out of it. Chance, so there's always an element of gambling. No matter how great you are at a certain game, there's always an element of chance. And then finally, consideration. And consideration doesn't necessarily need to be money. It could even be using significant effort on something. It could be having to invite Facebook friends, for example, to an app that you're playing in order to get more tries at the game. So prize, chance, and consideration. And I want us to keep those three things in mind as we go forward, because those three things are critical to us when we think about whether something is indeed gambling or not. So let's look at some apps here. One is, you know, I have a son that has played this game. Roblox is the name of the game, and it is free, and most games now are free. And the games are free because they have what are called in-app purchases. I think everybody probably pretty much knows, unless they've been living under a rock, that most of the games now have these in-app purchases in them. And most of the games are also available to anyone. And so this is an example of a freemium game. It's a portmanteau between free and premium. And they're free apps, and they do contain these in-app purchases. And the reason why they're free is because manufacturers have learned that they get much more money from us over time if they offer it to us free and then get us to start paying 99 cents. And once you start paying 99 cents at one little thing to try to get, you know, a little advantage in the game, it's much easier than over time to continue on with paying. These games, in terms of looking at even social casino games, so social casino games meaning, you know, slot machines, other types of games that you would find in a casino, these are almost always free, and they almost always have these in-app purchases. A study that is in press, just literally came out the other day, showed that 90% of social casino games are accessible to people under 12 years old. So that's something that we think about when we think about how our young people are using apps now. Of course, this call is mostly dedicated to young adults, but again, I want to go back to this being an issue that goes across the age spectrum. And especially as we think about even some of our parents or older adults that are using apps more than they ever have, playing games more than they ever have, this affects them absolutely as well. So the typical freemium scenario, if you've ever played one of these games, you have seen that you start playing and it's like, oh, this is great, it's free, oh, how fun, I get to play against somebody, or I'm trying to beat myself or whatever, and it's free. And then after a while, it gets harder to progress in the game. And so, wow, okay, now it's a little bit frustrating. But then the game offers us ways to level up faster. If we just put in 99 cents, it's like, hey, you put in 99 cents and now you have a way to level up faster. When we think about how this transitions and affects young people, especially the competitive nature of some young people, they want to look cool, they want to be a part of something. It could be easily enticing for someone to want to just spend a little bit of money to try to advantage in the game. Gamers, video gamers, they call that pay to win, and they don't like it because true gamers want to play with blood, sweat, tears, and Mountain Dew. In terms of looking at the most popular apps, in terms of even just looking at a few months ago, games are the #1 source of revenue for games, or excuse me, for apps. And in-app purchases contribute 9 out of every $10 that are spent within apps. So in-app purchases. So even if you want to spend, say, $4 on a book, over time, the in-app purchases is going to be way higher on a game that's free, or an app that's free, and then using those in-app purchases. So that's just illustrative of where we're at right now. When we look at really what that microtransaction involves, could it involve prize, chance, and consideration? Well, that's debatable. For prevention people like me, and I believe Derek Longmire and Mike Bazzelli are on this call as well. I haven't checked the attendees in a moment, but I don't mean to speak for them, but I would probably say yes, that they would also say these things are gambling. Prize, you're trying to get something better. Chance, there is that element of chance. And then finally, consideration, and Derek's saying yes. Consideration is putting money or something on the line to try to get it. And so can you get money out of it? No, typically not. But is it still putting something on the line to try to get something of greater value? And that answer, at least in many people's minds, would be yes. By the way, this is Candy Crush made $25 million last month alone. It grossed. And this information is also available if you want to check it out. It's called Sensor Tower. You can see how apps are doing, how much money they're making, etc. But there's a lot of money that's coming from this. Candy Crush came out 6 years ago. It's made $2 billion in 6 years. It's incredibly, obviously, it's still a very popular game. So when we look at how this works, and this is one of the things that I mentioned that we're going to be looking at live, is that this is kind of how it works. I have a little app that I downloaded, and it's already annoying me with notifications. But so if you look at this and then you press the spin, so look at that, it says player won a jackpot, and it's got stuff, and then it goes on, it's exciting. Our dopamine's being released. Okay, what's happening? Oh, whoa, I got a mini jackpot. Hey, look at that. That's cool. Oh, now there's a pop-up. 200,000 coins collect now, or I can spend a little bit of my real money, $1.99, to get 750,000, another pop-up. A special offer. For only $4.99, we can get 10 million coins. And then we got our mini jackpot over here. So we want to collect that. So as you see, there's a lot of going on here. It is definitely exciting when we think about how our brains work, and we think about how gambling works, and we think about the dopamine release and the anticipation of the reward. This is all connected in here. And when we look at the amount of money that we could actually spend, real money, to try to gain artificial money, it is that going back to that debatable piece around it. But many of us would indeed consider it gambling. This is also something that we want to think about in COVID right now, is for people who are not able to play and go to the video lottery machines at the delis and the taverns. If they're not able to do that, what are they going to do to replace that? And is social casino gaming one of those things? Obviously, we really don't have the answers right now, but it's something for us to think about, particularly as if you're a provider, to think about how you're connecting with your clients and asking those questions about what they're doing as an alternative. In terms of media changes overall during COVID-19, We've seen a lot of growth now. This study poll, excuse me, is actually from Poland. So that's one caveat. And the other is that it was conducted in early March. And we literally are changing almost by the hour in terms of the guidelines, restrictions, and recommendations with COVID-19. And so it'll be interesting to see how this affects over time. Now look at this third piece right here, mobile games. So in January, from January 6th to 12th, it increased by 14.5% in Poland. The use of mobile games did. And in March, from early March, from 2nd to 8th, it increased by 25% or 24%, excuse me. And again, we all know how things have shifted even since early March. Robbie and I were talking about a conference that he attended in early March in California. And now you think about, oh my God, conference, how could you possibly attend a conference? It's March. But it'll be really interesting to see over time and how this is affected in the United States as well. In terms of viewership and sports, as we alluded to a little bit earlier, we have a number of different things that are alternatives in viewership and what people are watching with sports. Sports documentaries are the #1 thing. 30 for 30, I love that show on ESPN. It's got a lot of good stuff on it. But then we have classic games, sports countdown shows, sports talk shows, obscure sports like marble racing. And look at that, esports. So let's talk esports, because this is really critical, especially when you think about young adults, and not just young adults, but also across the age spectrum again. So esports, if you are not aware of what esports are, if you compare traditional sports like NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NCAA sports, those are what we could refer to as traditional sports. And then we refer to esports as an umbrella term, just like we would say sports, baseball, football, etc. Esports are these electronic forms. They are digital games. So Apex Legends is one of them. They could be on a console, for example, Xbox, PlayStation. They could be on your laptop. They could be mobile games. Fortnite, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, and the games just keep coming. These are all leagues as well. They all run similarly to traditional sports leagues in that they have teams, they have personal trainers, they have all sorts of counseling and a variety of different things on the big level they do, and so it's very similar structurally. They also have a lot of live events, and they're very, very popular. With COVID-19, the live events are getting canceled, but there are many virtual events that are still happening. And there's a lot of consideration right now around, well, what about how this affects integrity of the game? Could someone be cheating online? And so on. But that's what esports really look like. So what I'd like to do is also look at a live demonstration of a streaming channel, of a streaming venue, a platform, excuse me, that's called Twitch. Now, Twitch is one of the most popular ones. There's other ones as well. YouTube even streams games. But Twitch is something that is online, it's free, and there are a variety of different players that have a lot of different money coming in. One of the most popular, well-known ones is Ninja. Okay, so this is live right now. Okay, so if you go to the main page on Twitch TV, one of the first things I notice is that they have a mature game that's on the front page. So that's a whole other topic that we won't get into today. But this is what's happening live right now. So there's some different channels, and these are popular channels of people who stream, gamers who stream. So just meaning that they're demonstrating what they're doing. They're having chats, they're having conversations while they're playing. And so Fortnite, probably many people on this call are aware of Fortnite, whether it's declining in popularity or not, it's still really big. So 124,000 viewers are watching Fortnite games right now. And if we look at one of these, Duo Cash Cups with Controller God. So we're on this one and we're seeing how many people are watching right now. 20,000 people are watching these now. And then this fella here, he's the streamer, and there's the chat box to the right. I think we kind of get it. So that's really what we're looking at when we talk about, things like streaming videos with esports. It is, if you don't have a young person in your life, or you're not having people in your lives that are many interested in video games, this is really, this is the world we're in now, and it's only going to keep growing. In fact, it is now seen as a traditional official high school sport. So it will soon be coming around. If your high school does not yet have a form of esports, one of the different types of games that's available, it is now an official high school sport. So if you go to the NFHS, you can see all the different activities and sports available, and esports is definitely one of them now. How does this shift our world right now in terms of legalized sports betting? Since the sports manufacturers, excuse me, since the operators of the legalized sports betting right now are scrambling, there's a lot that's unknown. And some now are looking at, as we pointed out a little bit earlier with iRacing, is looking at esports as being a plug-in. Now, many states don't have in their legislation specifically outlined for esports. And it was kind of interesting to see how the legalization has rolled out over time, because I was curious why they wouldn't talk about esports in the legislation. So whether it's a loophole or not, will be interesting to see over time how this works with legalities. But The Guardian in the UK says Fiverr on FIFA, which is a very, very popular soccer game that's available, and says bookmakers get creative in gambling's changed world. So bookies hope punters, the UK term for people who bet, will open up to esports as share prices fall with no regular sport on the horizon. Wild, wild world we're in right now. So if you go to ESPN, if you still don't think esports is that big of a thing, just go to espn.com/esports and you'll find a whole bunch of stuff there. On the right here, I clicked tickets the other day just to kind of see what's going on, and obviously there's no tickets available for events, just as there aren't tickets available for traditional events right now. There are scholarships, and it's a very big infrastructure, and looking at how this is working in high school, it's only growing. So in terms of the real convergence is how does it work then? Okay, so we have betting on esports, right? So we have direct competition. So things like, betting with each other, against each other on a game, traditional sports. Direct competition in terms of people going to events or placing bets on leagues or teams that are playing each other. We have fantasy esports, so similar to DraftKings and FanDuel, where you can create a fantasy esports team, depending on which team it is, league it is. And then we're going to look at ourselves. We're going to look at skins and loot boxes and other microtransactions, because those are a little bit more ambiguous. There is a totally new wave of sports betting right now. The National Council on Problem Gambling commissioned a study last year to look at the survey of gambling attitudes and gambling experiences across the United States. This survey looked at a variety of different things, and within those things is really drilled down in sports betting. And of people who have bet on sports, over 10% of them have actually placed a bet on esports. Now, this is last year, so it'll be really interesting over time to see how this shifts, especially with COVID-19. It's already been increasing, but now with COVID-19, we'll really, really be curious as how this affects the shift of a willingness and desire to bet on esports. In terms of revenues, looking at this overall, we see a definite shift. And again, word of the day is COVID-19. So it'll be curious to see how this shifts over time. You might ask where the money comes from. Where does all this money come from on esports? It's very, very similar to traditional sports in terms of, I keep saying in terms of, it could be a drinking game. Please don't make that a drinking game. Sponsorships, betting, similar, prize pools, similar, merchandise, similar, and ticket sales, similar. So the money comes very, almost identically to how traditional sports revenue comes in. An example, they're filling up arenas. Now, let's look at loot boxes. Loot boxes are something that's really come on the horizon. It's something that even a couple of years ago, people weren't very familiarized with, and now increasingly familiarized with, especially in our problem gambling world, in the betting world. Loot boxes are just basically, they are a form of a microtransaction, whether it is in credits for a game that somebody already has credits for to place on the line to try to get something of value. Or it could be something that they actually start spending their money on and add credits to the game with their real money. And I kind of analogize it to maybe even an old school grab bag that you try to get something great out of it. Or, these grocery stores when you stick in a quarter and you try to get one of those cool little prizes out of it. And I remember I would always try to, my favorite NFL team was the San Francisco 49ers. There used to be a pencil machine, and I would try to put in the money to try to see if I could get the 49ers pencil, and inevitably I would never get it. I always get like the Colts or something like that. Sorry, Colts. But these machines could be analogized in terms of virtually as getting something really, really great out of it. A diamond ring, for example, when most of the time you get something that's really undesirable, like a temporary tattoo, for example. So this is a loot box in action. This is from a game, and you can see just kind of how it works. This particular, it's a GIF. It doesn't have any noise. But you can see like the anticipation of the reward coming. And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to get? Am I going to get a new character? Am I going to get a better weapon? Am I going to get something called a skin that may just be like an aesthetic thing to look cool? And so, yeah, I mean, you can almost see just how it can look similarly in terms of the anticipation of reward from a slot machine. It's that intermittent reward piece that's really interesting to us, especially in the problem gambling world. So skins are basically just for entertainment. They're for street cred and maybe even getting some money out of them, some investment out of them. I had an intern that I was working with a couple of years ago whose son was holding on to these skins right under her nose. A former colleague of mine was actually still holding on to his skin to try to invest in it and thinking it's worth a lot of money and seeing when he could sell it for greater value. But this is kind of, this is from one website. It's, and in the UK betting commission, or excuse me, UK gambling commission showed that over 10% of 11 to 16-year-olds have played, the 16-year-olds have placed bets using endgame items. It's a big world. There is a video here that I'm not going to play in the interest of time, but underage skin gambling is on the line. How does it work? It is similar to a roulette machine, a slot machine. It could be any different type of mechanism that somebody puts in their credits and tries to get something, or their own skin and tries to get a greater skin out of it, or they could put in credits or money. And some may say, why would you want to care about a skin? Well, the difference is not really that big, at least to me, in terms of this. This is a digital thing. It is not a tangible thing, but neither are our music or movies anymore. They're not tangible either, right? And so there is still value in them. And we think about prize, chance, and consideration. One of the funny things that I saw the other day was from a skins betting Twitter, and it talked about a massive 25 times toilet paper giveaway. What a world we are in right now, peeps. In terms of where young people get the money, they get the money from a variety of different ways. Most of the time, it could be grandma sending them a prepaid debit card. It could be things that you find at the grocery store kiosk. It could be online. There are so many different opportunities to get either Xbox money, PlayStation money, Steam, which is typically played on a laptop, Fortnite, Roblox, you have it, you name it, they're there, and they don't show up on credit card statements as gambling. It just doesn't. These are mostly prepaid type of things. All right, polling question number 1. Robbie, you ready?
That's my cue. All right, so we're going to launch our first polling question here, which I will do now. And it asks, according to a study commissioned by the National Council on Problem Gambling, what percentage of American sports bettors said they have gambled on esports? Is it A, 7%, B, 91%, C, 11%, or D, 0.1%? According to a study commissioned by the National Council on Problem Gambling, what percentage of American sports bettors said that they have already gambled on esports? All right, guys, we're up to about 60% voting. We'll give it a few more seconds. And when we get over 80% here, I'll probably close her down. T-minus 10 seconds. Okay, according to a study commissioned by the National Council on Problem Gambling, what percentage of American sports bettors said that they had gambled on esports? The answer is C, 11%. I remember that from, it was what, about 10 slides ago, right, Julie?
Yeah, I know. I tricked them. I didn't want to put it right after the slide. Make sure people are still awake.
Exactly. No, which I think, looking at this, and I did not know the answer. You sent them to me in transparency, but 11%. Wow. 11%. And that's a larger number than what you think, because think of a sports gambler, right? That's not, I guess that's a trend that's going to continue to grow, right?
Yeah, sure is. Sure
Yeah.
is. All right. So what? So why does this matter? We see these trends. We know these things are happening. Why does it matter? Well, the risks matter. For one, is brain development. We know the brain's still developing until 25 years old, approximately. That our prefrontal cortex, decision making, impulse control. These things are the higher level functioning is the last part of our brains to develop. So it's important, especially as we look at emerging adults, is how this affects the brain. And we know that the anticipation of the reward is the thing that matters the most, especially in problem gambling. It is something that people say, well, it's about the money. It might be about the money, but more than that, it's about the action. It's about staying in action. It's about that anticipation and that reward system, the release of that dopamine. If someone's expecting to lose, they're not going to have that dopamine release. And that's the piece on the left here. If someone's expecting to gain, they are going to have that dopamine release, which is why people who have gambling problems are oftentimes notoriously, unfortunately, usually it's a great characteristic, is unfortunately they're so optimistic. Well, it's okay, I lost. The big win's just around the corner. I just got to do this one more, and chasing. And that is because that expectation of a win. Not all gaming is problem gaming. Not all gambling is problem gaming. I want to make sure that is clear, that there is a continuum, just as there would be with alcohol use, for example. And so when we look at what gaming disorder is, that it's not all gaming is problem gaming. Gaming disorder now is the World Health Organization classification and the International Classification of Diseases 11. The ICD-11 that will be coming out has definitely characterized gambling disorder as an official condition. Now, Nancy Petrie, who used to study internet gaming disorder and problem gambling, looked at the similarities of the criteria for gambling and gaming disorders. And this is very oversimplified, but just for the purposes of this being a brief call or conversation, is that one is increasing amounts of money in order to achieve it. So increasing amounts of money or increasing amounts of time in order to achieve that excitement. Restless or irritability when attempting to cut down or stop. Making unsuccessful repeated attempts to cut down or stop. Preoccupation. Gambling to escape or feeling distressed. After losing, often returns another day to get even. Lying to conceal the extent of it, and jeopardizing your significant relationship, job, or educational career opportunity. So these are all similarities between those two disorders. Because the World Health Organization does not classify an ICD-11 similarly to the DSM, this is what it looks like to be the most close overlay that we can in terms of the signs of the issues. The issue that did not seem to rise in category of gaming disorder was relying on others to provide money to relieve desperate financial situations, or what we call bailouts. We can argue that it could be true even with gaming disorder. But if you'd like to take a look at that, and there was somebody that asked that they want a couple people said they want copies of the PowerPoint. I will happy to send that as a PDF, and then these links are clickable. You can take a look at this actual article. In looking at research, adolescents who played simulated gambling games are more likely to later move to real gambling. That's a critical thing when we think about emerging adults. And Captain Obvious shows up and says, duh, these are things that we already know to be true, but we use research to really illustrate that, and it's really important that we do. They're also more likely to later on have gambling problems. Loot box research. So what's happening with loot boxes, and how do these affect young people or everyone across the age spectrum? Looking at adult gamers, 90% of gamers had opened a loot box. Now that's not to say that they actually placed in-game credit or put something on the line for it, but they've opened a loot box. Loot boxes are almost everywhere in games these days. Paying for loot boxes was linked to problem gambling. Research that was just a couple of months ago that was put out showed that loot boxes are in 6 out of 10 of the top games in Google Play and in the Apple Store, and that more than 9 out of 10 of the games feature loot boxes are as suitable for age 12 and up. Looking at skins, those who bet skins have higher rates of at-risk and problem gambling than those who did not bet skins. And that's a considerable difference if you look at 23% versus 8%. And they also have a greater breadth of gambling involvement. So they're more likely to bet on a variety of different things. All right, polling question número 2.
Question 2. Okay, so it asks, and I'm launching right away for the sake of time. So we're going to give you guys 20 seconds. Which of the following signs is not common between video gaming and gambling disorders? Is it A, tolerance? Is it B, bailouts? Is it C, preoccupation? Or is it D, using it to escape? Which of the following signs is not common between video gaming and gambling disorders? You guys are answering pretty quickly.
Good job, peeps.
Yes. T minus 10. Okay, the answer is B, bailouts.
Yeah, it's one of the only things that looks to be similar. We don't know. I mean, we know that parents oftentimes have bailed out their kids when they have gotten into trouble either with losing their jobs or not doing any housework or those kind of things. Those could be considered bailouts. We're hearing that more and more than ever, that these things are often, unfortunately, not tangibly, not monetarily necessarily, sometimes monetarily in letting people stay without paying rent, but it is looked at that bailouts are a little bit different because of the nature of gambling inherently involving money. All right, this is what we really need to talk about, is how to address these issues. Now, resources are very scarce. In looking at federal funding for gambling disorder, there is zero. There's not a single red cent that goes to problem gambling services in the United States. It's all funded by the states. We're fortunate now that obviously Illinois now has funding, and the surrounding states have funding to provide problem gambling services, but not every state does. And it's operated differently in each state. Most always the money is coming from the industry itself. There are opportunities for self-exclusion. So operators themselves typically offer some type of self-exclusion option. If you go to, say, DraftKings, this is just one example of many. You have casinos, you have a variety of different things, river boats, to be able to self-exclude as well. The recommendation is not starting with a lifetime self-exclusion. It's been shown to not be as effective, mainly because people are skittish. They don't want to necessarily go black or white. I need to exclude for my entire lifetime. It's more of a motivational interviewing thing. So starting off with a few months of self-exclusion can actually be really effective. And Charlie Ordili, who is one of our GameSense advisors, supervisors in Massachusetts, knows this firsthand, that we've had an option for, we used to have an option for 6 months exclusion, and now it's a year. And it'll be interesting over time to see how that works. So we would recommend using the same strategies that you use in your typical helping profession, however that looks. So you don't need to know all the tech. You don't need to know what type of skin is the most coveted right now. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of the video games, but use those same tools that you already use and are very effective. Prevention, the same thing. Nobody wants to think that their young people around them are gambling, young adults. Everybody says, oh, I don't, gambling, I don't gamble. Well, do you play Powerball? Yeah. Oh, okay, I guess that's gambling. So using gaming language is a way to really get in the door right now. Change the Game Ohio, Go Ohio, is a fantastic tool that really drives home some very clear recommendations on gaming. And it is really talking about that convergence, and they're very approachable fact sheets and warning signs and other materials out there. So I can't recommend this website enough. It is fantastic. For gamers who are looking at maybe getting into recovery for help, also for loved ones, GameQuitters.com is an incredible resource. It is constantly updated. This fellow named Cam Adair started it. He's a gamer in recovery himself, and he's even placed online some videos around how to navigate screen time and gaming during coronavirus. And this is his specialty. He's been doing this for years now. He has a forum that's online. He has tips for alternatives for gaming instead of, just quitting. We know that recovery is not about subtraction. It's also about how to replace it with other healthy alternatives. And he provides so many of those. And his resource is free. He also has subscriptions as well. But even if you just follow him on Twitter, you'll learn so much more about what's going on in the gaming world, even during COVID. For gaming help during COVID-19, it's recommended to stay on some kind of schedule. I don't have young adults in my home. I have a 10 and 15-year-old. We are on a schedule, but it is not strict and followed to the letter. I think I would be a hypocrite or crazy to say that our kids are following everything strictly to the letter. It is not necessarily feasible during this time. We try to keep them on track, though. There's some kind of structure. People need structure. All of us need some kind of structure. And giving ourselves grace to use social media right now, especially for that connectivity, given the fact that we are isolated. There are some links here as well. Healthychildren.org has some tips. Common Sense Media have some tips around monitoring, making media use plans, around effective apps and other things to use for keeping physical activity during this issue. Some things are not free, some things are. But again, give yourself grace right now because things are just really, really hard. And I love this. It says parenting during coronavirus shutdown day 1. And day 3. We'll see where we go in a couple of weeks from now, but usual norms are unrealistic, so we can't be so hard on ourselves right now, or our clients necessarily if you're a clinician. Most of us are aware of mindfulness apps that are out there, Calm, Headspace. There's just so many out there that usually have free resources, but also sometimes, if you pay for an upgrade and premium, you get a whole bunch of different things that are available to you as well. Exercise apps, especially now that we're all stuck indoors, and especially if the weather is crappy, we need to figure out a way to stay active and increase that natural dopamine levels within ourselves and try to stay healthy and stay of a sound mind during this all. A caveat is to use caution if screen addiction itself is a key. That is incredibly difficult to overcome, especially right now, and especially because if we look at young adults, most young adults right now are home. If they're in college, they are studying online. So screens themselves are almost impossible to avoid at this point. And that's a special consideration that needs to be taken into account. And I don't know of anybody who's been successful at dealing with that itself during this time. But if anybody does know, please do share on the chats. We want to watch for key signs. So if you have a young adult or even a young person or an older person in your life, if you're noticing these key signs, irritability when they can't do it, hiding their phone or their device, weird money issues, all of a sudden now they don't have that debit card that grandma gave them, and where did all that money go? I thought you said you wanted to buy snacks and now you don't have any money. How do you not have any money? And increased isolation and less interest in other activities. Obviously right now we are in increased isolation. So even more so though than you would typically experience in that person. In looking at recovery, the best resource is you. You right now are connecting with people probably in different ways than you have ever done before. We are in a different world. We've had HIPAA restrictions lifted that allow us to even connect with people in different formats than we ever have before. Gamblers Anonymous is now providing helpline calls across the country. And these links will provide some key pieces there for gambling. Now, this is not for gaming specifically. Many states are looking into providing problem gaming services along with their problem gambling services. Oregon is doing that as well. The problem is now with COVID-19, we're not sure about funding and how that's going to look. So it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out over time. But these are a variety of different online tools and methods that people can just set myself a timer so that I'd have time for questions and answers here and comments. There's also some software that allows for, now these are specifically for gambling help, GamBlock, GamBan. There are apps for connections and recovery with others. This is one example called Connections. And Zoom, as we are on right now, Doxy.me, and so many others, like even WhatsApp you can use right now during this crisis. For more information about recovery specifically and telehealth, I cannot recommend Jody Bechtold enough. She has been doing this for a long time now. She has her finger on the pulse of telehealth and problem gambling. She's been doing workshops on this for quite some time now, and it's sort of her hour of most need, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. But she is happy and willing to have the conversations with people. Better Institute she runs in Pittsburgh, and she has a variety of different options that she's using right now for telehealth. polling question number 3.
Cool. Okay. For our last final poll question, let me relaunch it. That was a great visual, Julie, on the COVID-19 adult at the beginning and at the end, Mary Poppins and Carol Burnett's character. Okay. Let me launch this, get out of here. Okay. Last question is, which of the following interventions would be considered least realistic for providers to recommend? Is it A, exercise, B, mindfulness, C, discontinued internet, D, telehealth counseling, or D, all the above? Which of the following interventions would be considered least realistic for providers to recommend? Okay, we're getting up to 70%, and I see some folks raising their hand, but we'll get to them. Okay, it is C, discontinuing internet.
Good. All right. Awesome. Awesome job. We would not recommend that discontinuing, that it would be all of the above, because discontinuing is just unrealistic right now. The bottom line is, especially right now, is that you are more important than ever. We still need connection as human beings. I love what Brene Brown says, is we're hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives. And without it, there is suffering. And we are all in a place of suffering right now. We are all in this together. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important to give yourself grace as well as you do with your others in your life. So as us in the helping profession, we typically judge ourselves way more harshly than we judge others. And so I just encourage us all to stay connected during this time. And I cannot express enough appreciation for you taking the time to be on this webinar. And so right now, just with that, thank you. I'd like to turn it over and see if there are any comments or questions or other suggestions. Really quickly, Derek Longmire suggested Jody Bechtold is doing a webinar tomorrow. So if you look in your chat, you will see that link for details for that. So thank you so much, Derek, for that asset. That's great.
Yes, and Julie, great job, by the way. And I loved how you incorporated the COVID-19 suggestions and how that can interplay and perhaps almost put gasoline on the fire here with this, with
Sure
gambling
did.
or gaming. Yeah, that was really nice and great. And by the way, I'm sure you just saw the chat, but you just saw from one of your fans, Allison Drain, just said you
Well,
rock.
we're a mutual fan club, so Allison rocks.
Yeah, so just a couple of questions, and we can run a little bit over if you're good with it, Julie.
You know what, Robbie, just real quick, I am very good with it. However, I do want to be respectful of people's time, even if you're in your slippers. We did say that we'd end at 2, so I will stick around for sure. But you know, as soon as the clock hits here, you're welcome to leave. And again, thank you.
Good point. Thank you very much for that. Yes. So we've got 3 more minutes, speaking of that. So just a couple of quick questions here. Julie, we got Peter asked, what age or ranges were you referring to with young adults?
I'm not seeing that. Did he just, Peter?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Is it I just pulled it up under Q&A on my
cool.
bar. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll take a look. Oh, there we go. Thank you. What age is the range? So young adults, I mean, it's a broad spectrum. Typically people say 18 to 25. And in my perspective is actually to look at younger people. So I typically even looked as young as 15 to look at a young adult. You know, it depends on the study that you look at. So without, you know, seeing what exactly you're talking about, there's a variety of different studies that have a variety of different age levels. So I'm not sure if that gets at it. Typically, we look at 18 to 25 as being young adults.
Cool. And if you don't see this, Penny's asking, and I think you perhaps just hit this, is there self-exclusion for video gaming parlors?
Not to my knowledge yet, but I could be completely wrong. We don't have it in Oregon. We do have video lottery in Oregon. So maybe somebody can tell me in Illinois. I don't think so, but somebody pipe in if you know of self-exclusion for video gaming parlors in Illinois, please.
And Denise still is trying to wrap her head around what a skin actually is.
Yeah, we went over that pretty quickly. So thanks, Denise, for asking. I'm sure there's other people who are probably curious as well. A skin is actually just something that it's an aesthetic thing that makes something look better. Typically, it's mostly used as video games as form of weapons. So someone will have a weapon on a game, and someone will create this cool design for it and wrap it in what they call a skin. Other skins are like virtual clothing, things like that are available in video games. They typically don't have value that actually helps somebody progress in a game, but they're more for aesthetic value. So I hope that helps, Denise.
Yep, and thank you, Julie. And just so you guys know, it's 2 o'clock, top of the hour. So if you have to leave, thank you very much for participating and attending today's call. And again, our next one will be on April 6th at noon Central Standard Time with Dr. David Ledgerwood. So thank you again for joining us, and maybe we'll stick around a couple minutes, maybe, Julie, and see what other questions we might have. But thank you very much. Yeah. We had someone raising their hand here, if you don't mind, maybe, and it's Penny. Let me see if I can perhaps, if she's still on. Gosh, this keeps moving on me.
Thanks, everyone. Robbie and I are sticking around.
Okay. I guess Penny might have dropped off the call. And there's just a lot of thank yous, thank yous, thank yous. Everybody take care. Thank you, Julie.
As my dog sneezes in the background.
So does anybody have any other questions why we still have Julie Hines on the call?
Any other comments?
Kendra is raising her hand. Let me see if I can get to Kendra. Boy, just had her up, I thought. I can't find Kendra on the list. Huh. Oh, here it is. Okay. Kendra, are you there? Let me see. Robbie's obviously experiencing technical difficulties himself. I'm trying to unmute Kendra and having a little bit of, Julie, maybe you can, I don't know. I don't know. It's the unmute. Kendra, can you speak? Do you want Kendra? No, I don't want to do that. Huh. Yeah, it's not unmuting her for some reason. Yeah. Kendra, maybe chat us. Let me check the chat real quick. Because I'm, for some reason, unable to unmute her. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, listen, thank you, Julie, very much. And Kendra, feel free to email me the question. I'll relay it to Julie. But we do want to thank everybody that's been on the call, participated on the call. And thank you, Julie, very much for your time. And again, thanks for the COVID examples and how this is going to affect gambling disorder and gaming disorder, right? It was very interesting.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll
Everybody stay healthy. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you,
stay
Julie.
safe, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.